Is a stock being overbought a good thing or a bad thing? Hey everyone, I'm Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior. Welcome to my weekly show on StockCharts TV. A little later in the week than normal, but hey, we're here and happy to share some charts and insights with all of you. I find that stocks being overbought often elicits a specific reaction from investors and certainly from traders a lot of times, thinking of it as a bad thing. There's a negative connotation to being overbought, right? A stock has gone too high too quickly, and that's probably a bad thing, right? It means we're going to come down. Well, not necessarily, and it actually depends quite a bit on your time frame. So today we're going to talk about overbought conditions. We're going to use an indicator called RSI, the Relative Strength Index, probably an indicator you're familiar with. And if you followed me and my work for a while, I use it all the time, so you probably have seen it. But we'll talk a little bit about this indicator created by Wells Wilder. We'll talk about what overbought and oversold conditions mean. Then we'll look at one specific example here recently, Motorola Solutions, which is currently overbought. Here in mid-September, we'll talk about how that actually may be a very good thing for the chart of Motorola. You don't have to look that far back in recent histories to see a previous example where overbought is actually a very good thing. Before we get there, as a reminder, I do a daily market recap show called Chart This with Dave Keller. You can find that on my YouTube channel called Market Misbehavior with Dave Keller. Please tune in every weekday after the close at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. If you watch it live, you can ask questions as we go, and I always take a question or two from the live audience at the end. You can also watch the replays at any time, overnight, or wherever you're at around the world on my YouTube channel as well. Also, we have a Market Misbehavior podcast, which is a ton of fun. We're just over, I think, 66 episodes in the podcast since launching earlier this year. I've had some fantastic interviews with a lot of really knowledgeable market practitioners, most recently with Ian Reynolds. Ian is a director at Subaria Capital from Brisbane, Australia. We talked about his sort of formational years as a market maker in London. He successfully launched and sold a number of technology companies, was an early Bitcoin investor. We talked a lot about the mental side of trading, about, managing a P&L and how to think about risk versus return. We talked about market structure and how it's evolved. And we talked a lot about the current market conditions for gold, Bitcoin, the US dollar, and a lot of other things. You can find that on our YouTube channel, also on all the podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, etc. With that in mind, let's get to the chart of Motorola Solutions. We're going to stick with this chart today to talk about overbought conditions. So the way we define whether something is overbought or not is using an indicator called RSI. Now, to be clear, there are other indicators that are often used to describe overbought and oversold conditions, but for simplicity, I think today we're going to just talk about RSI. RSI is the Relative Strength Index. This is an indicator created by Wells Wilder back in the 1970s. He wrote a fantastic book called New Technical Trading Systems. Is that true? I should know the name of that book. I think it's it. Sorry, Wells, if that's not true. But something like that. New Technical Trading Systems sounds right. But it's a great book because he actually shows you, he hand calculated indicators like RSI. Parabolic studies were released in that book. The Directional Movement Index and the ADX line all came from the same book where he sort of announced and shared these indicators with the world. RSI is a measure of momentum, right? So it's called a momentum indicator or an oscillator. Here we're looking at the RSI for Motorola Solutions. And as a friendly reminder, when we talk about relative strength index, the RSI, we are not talking about relative strength or relative performance. This is where you look at a stock versus a benchmark. Subject for other videos, which we will feature here on StockCharts TV. But for now, we're focusing particular on price momentum. So the way that this indicator works is it basically calculates over a certain look-back period, what's the average up day and what's the average down day, right? So when a stock closes higher than yesterday, how much higher does it tend to go? When a stock closes lower than yesterday, how much lower does it tend to go? If the RSI is right about at 50, that basically means that the up days and the down days are kind of even. So if you have a stock where the RSI is kind of right around that 50 level, and I usually think of it as kind of range bound between 40 and 60, that probably means that the price is in a range, right? It's range bound, or it's consolidating. There's no real clear upside or downside momentum. The up and down days are kind of even, and so the RSI is neutral in the middle of the range. When the RSI is above 70, as it is now for Motorola, we call that overbought, meaning it's gone up a ton. And what that specifically means is the average up day is much, much stronger than the average down day. So it makes sense that in an uptrend, you're often going to become overbought because we're having much stronger up days. And while there might be down days during that period, the down moves are probably pretty light. To the contrary, when the RSI goes below 30, we call that oversold, meaning it's gone too low too quickly. And that means the down days are a lot stronger than the up days. So what a lot of people, I think, oversimplistically do is they think of the indicator as that's it, right? All you need to do is look for when it's overbought and oversold. So here we can see, sorry, I zoomed in too much. We can see in February of 2025, the price sold off. Motorola broke below its 200-day moving average. We can see the RSI breaks below 30. That's oversold. So that should be a contrarian bullish sign, right? We've moved too low too quickly. Think of it as a rubber band that's stretched really far away, so we're probably going to come back up. And sure enough, we saw a brief bounce, about a week and a half, before we eventually continued the downtrend. You can see all during this sort of downtrend phase, March, April, May of 2025, we actually became oversold a couple different times. And each one of those times, those oversold conditions did indeed identify some short-term pops higher. We can also see back here in October of 2024 and November of 2024 when we became overbought. And that often indicates the rubber band is stretched to the upside. We've gone too high too quickly, so we're probably going to pull back a little bit because we're overextended. And it's worth noting, if you do use an indicator like RSI this way, I would caution you, don't use the stock becoming overbought as the sell signal. You really want to wait until we come out of that overbought region, right? So the signal using this traditional methodology is, becoming overbought is sort of, you're ready for the signal. Actually coming out of the overbought region is the trigger telling you, okay, we're no longer overbought. We're probably mean reverting to the downside. So if I'm a swing trader, right, I probably would use the RSI. And to be honest with you, pro tip, I would use a shorter time frame, like a 9-day or a 5-day RSI instead of the traditional 14-day RSI, which is what we're looking at here for Motorola. And I could basically identify some of those swings because overbought and oversold conditions often mean short-term mean reversion, right? It's where stock tends to trade back down after hitting an extreme. But in my years working with professional money managers, which are more longer-term investors, we realized that overbought conditions often helped us identify some of the strongest opportunities out there. Working with growth investors taught me that it doesn't have to necessarily be about buying stocks at their bottoms. I might want to actually buy stocks showing strength because strength often leads to further strength. This is the style of investing known as momentum investing or trend following, which is basically identifying strong charts that studies have shown over many, many decades of data in the equity space. Strong charts often get stronger over a longer period of time frame, right? Over a 3-6 month forward-looking period. Trend following kind of works pretty well. So if you're more of a medium-term or long-term investor, you really want to think of overbought conditions generally as more of a positive thing. We would always say overbought means up a lot, right? It's not a bad thing that the stock went up a ton. It actually is probably a pretty good thing. Look to the left half of the chart of Motorola and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So here we're looking at April, May of 2024, we can see that Motorola made a low here in early 2024. If you're a candle fan, it's actually a perfect hammer candle there. We gapped higher and then began to trend higher. We were overbought just barely here. Just touching the overbought region here, third week in May. We then on the next leg higher, we were overbought here, second week in June, third week in June, again, third week in July, first week in August, second week in August, third week in August, we remained overbought. Look at all these times that the stock was overbought. And that was actually during this fantastic uptrend. So the fact that the stock kept going to the overbought region was not really a negative sign. It wasn't a bearish sign on that medium-term time frame. It was actually telling you the trend is so positive that we're getting overbought when we have these rallies, when we're making a new 3-month high we're becoming overbought. So that actually tells you there's plenty of upside momentum in this stock. So overbought conditions for the medium-term or long-term time frame, pretty encouraging. Now, does that mean that you necessarily would be buying, or if that's a great idea to buy every time we're overbought? No, right? From a tactical time frame, the stock often pulled back from those overbought conditions, right? So if you bought when we were in the overbought region, you probably bought more in the upper end of this big trend channel. So waiting for the stock to no longer be overbought often gave you a better entry point. Look at pullbacks to a 21-day exponential moving average or an ascending 50-day moving average often provided a good tactical entry point, but the overbought conditions themselves were actually pretty encouraging. So one of the things I actually often look for as a growth investor is I scan for stocks that are overbought. Not for a working list of stocks to short or sell, but more for a basket of stocks that are in a primary uptrend, and I might want to be looking for a short-term pullback as maybe an opportunity to buy into the next leg higher. So we can see this example sort of in the latter half of 2024, where overbought conditions for Motorola were actually a very good sign for the long term. In the short term, it gave you an idea of maybe, tactically, we might want to wait for a pullback to an established support level or maybe a key moving average as an entry point. However, the fact that it's becoming overbought tells you that the uptrend is pretty good. Look what happens as we fast forward a little bit from 2024, which was a very strong year, at least in the second half, to 2025. The first half of 2025, pretty rough for Motorola, right? It's going down. And in January and February, the S&P is going up quite a bit, right? As was the NASDAQ. Motorola was actually an outlier because it peaked in November and was just in a pretty good downtrend going into the February market peak. But look at how the RSI never got anywhere near the overbought region during a downtrend. So in significant downtrends, the stock will often become oversold on the downward legs. And on these counter trend rallies, the RSI doesn't get much above 60. So the fact that the RSI is not getting above 60 during this period is just a friendly reminder that Motorola is most likely still in a primary downtrend. You want to look for when the price breaks out and when the RSI pushes above 60, right? So toward the end of July, when we saw an upswing, when we finally break above the 200-day moving average and the RSI finally gets back to the overbought region, I would argue that's actually one of the great bullish signals that we've observed from Motorola in 2025, because what that implied was that this secular or cyclical downtrend in Motorola was most likely over. We'd been consolidating for a while, but finally we broke out on stronger momentum. So these overbought conditions actually sort of indicate that the price is now in a primary uptrend. So since that major low in April, since these higher lows in May and in June and then July, look at how we finally broke above the 200-day moving average. The stock became overbought in late July, again overbought in early August, again overbought in late August, and this week, once again, the stock is overbought. So looking at the chart of Motorola, is it a good thing or a bad thing that Motorola is overbought? Well, if we look at the history here, we can see it really depends on your time frame, right? As a tactical reading, do I necessarily want to be adding to a position the days when it's overbought? Probably not, and especially the days when it just comes out of that overbought region. That probably tells me, all right, we're in a bit of a pullback, but we're still in a primary uptrend. Let me find a short-term pullback. Let me find a good tactical entry point. Once again, the 21-day exponential moving average becomes a really good place to be. By the way, I just recently did a video on the 21-day EMA, how I use that as one of my tactical entry points and also as a great way to manage risk. I'll make sure we include a link. So if you want to check out that video, learn more about the 21-day exponential moving average, how it relates to other things like the 50-day and other things that we've talked about. Hopefully that helps. So this description of Motorola, number one, is to highlight a stock, Motorola, in the technology sector, which has had an incredible run here over the last couple months. But these recent overbought conditions, if you've seen that and you've thought, it might be too late for Motorola, don't forget to look back in previous bullish cycles. And it's not just Motorola. This is pretty common in the equity and ETF space, where overbought conditions actually often indicate a stock in a primary uptrend, and usually are the types of charts that are showing strength and often lead to much further strength. By the way, if you're looking for stocks like Motorola that are currently overbought, meaning they're most likely in a primary uptrend, we can use the scanning capabilities on StockCharts.com to do that. Number of different ways to do that. Actually, I'm wondering if there's a sample scan. So the StockCharts platform has had a bit of a facelift here earlier this year. You may see some of these drop-down menus and links are a little bit different. I love what they did to the website. And if you click on scans and alerts, which is an area of the platform that I think is fantastic. And by the way, most of these tools I'm going to show you here in terms of the scans and the alerts, you need to be a paid member of StockCharts to really take advantage of that. It is arguably the most underpriced product that I use. I don't think that's actually debatable. It very much is. So I would encourage you to take on a free trial if you're not getting one of the memberships at StockCharts. It is easily worth its weight in its capabilities and its ability to upgrade what you're doing. So here we can actually scan. I was going to say, I don't know if it's one of the default patterns, but now I'm thinking maybe I should make it one. I might see if I could do this. Don't forget about this list, by the way. This way you can actually search for this. And I would say one of the things you might want to do from this page is look for stocks making new 3-month highs. Because when a stock is making a new 3-month high, going back to our chart of Motorola, this is a scan that I actually run at least once a week. A new 3-month high kind of comes in right here. When Motorola broke above 430, it got to a higher point than it's been for the last 3 months. It actually happened here when we finally broke above that late April peak. So it probably started showing up on the new 3-month high scan right about here early August. Sure enough, it's when it was overbought. So there's a bit of an overlap from some of these indicators. So looking for new 3-month highs or new 6-month highs, you're going to find stocks that are probably overbought. But within the scan engine, so if we go to the advanced scan workbench, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but if you go to technical indicators, go down here to RSI. Where are you? Here we go. Nope. RSI. Add. RSI greater than 70. It defaults to stocks breaking above or stocks with an RSI above 70. We can actually, using the StockCharts scanning engine, we can look for stocks that are just becoming overbought. We can look for stocks that have been overbought for over a week. There's all sorts of advanced ways you can use this platform to look for stocks in strong primary uptrends. But one of my favorite ways to do it is looking for an RSI above 70. So that's it. That is how I think of RSI. And again, I would encourage you, if you've gotten into the trap of saying RSI's overbought, that means I want to avoid it. Check your thinking a little bit, particularly if you're more of a medium-term or long-term investor. If you're a swing trader, I get the idea of selling into strength and looking for stocks that are overbought, betting on mean reversion. Again, I'd encourage you to look at like a shorter term, like a 9-day or even a 5-day RSI to make that particular assessment. But if you're more of an investor, don't be afraid to look for stocks that are overbought as an idealist, right? As a watch list. Use the overbought conditions as a tactical measure, right? So maybe we want to wait for a pullback to a 21-day EMA or something like that to layer into a position or to buy into short-term weakness. But remember, those stocks that are overbought just means they're up a lot. These are stocks that could be in primary uptrends and could certainly help your portfolio well beyond today, tomorrow, and next week. Don't forget to use the scanning engine, and we showed how to use the just a simple scan for the RSI above 70, just as a working list of charts that are probably showing some strength here. And again, as always, you want to review those charts for the specific technical characteristics that are present. As a reminder, if you like this sort of thinking about overbought and oversold conditions, if you want help identifying some of those names and some of those charts that are demonstrating those conditions, also you want to learn about momentum divergences and other stuff, these are things that we cover every trading day in our market recap show called Chart This with Dave Keller. So head over to Market Misbehavior with Dave Keller. That's my YouTube channel. You can follow that. Follow me there. Also, don't forget about the Market Misbehavior podcast. My recent interview with Ian Reynolds. Also recently, Larry Tentarelli. All sorts of other fantastic market experts that I've been able to sit down with. All of those conversations are available for you to review on my YouTube channel as well. That'll do it for today. Thanks so much for watching my show here on StockCharts TV. My name's Dave Keller with Market Misbehavior, reminding you it's always a good time to own good charts.